Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are going to be allowing, some time just for some folks to join in, and then we will be getting started soon. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm looking forward to a great conversation, and yeah, it's going to be a really good. It's going to be a great discussion. So we'll be getting started very soon, which is going to allow some time for some other folks to join in, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Well, I wanted to thank you all for being here today to join us for a special discussion as we dive into the challenges, needs, and experiences of single parents who have had foster care experience. I want to thank my panelists for being here today. Thank you all that decided to register and attend. We are in for a great conversation, and really these are the type of conversations that I am trying to continue to just push the envelope to have are just really centered around the real issues that foster youth have experienced, and how those issues have impacted their lives, as they transition from foster care to college and into, adulthood. And so these discussions are very much so needed. I'm also a single parent that has experienced the foster care system, and it was just so many different fears and anxieties that came along with that. So we thought that this would be a great conversation to have, to just provide some advice and some tips to other former or current foster youth that are in college and, new parents or have been parents, and, just provide them with some tools so that they can continue to be successful. So again, thank you so much for being here today. And yeah. So just a little bit about the Youth Voice program. So my name is Raquel Wilson. I am the proud program manager. I have been here with Foster and Media Connections for 2 years. And within these 2 years, it just has been, just everlasting. Like, I don't know. I just kind of feel like that this is what I was always destined to do, and just destined to be, and to be able to use my experience and some of the things that I've went through to help shape some of the conversations and push the envelopes and help our writers, learn how to articulate their experiences on paper. It just has been very much so fulfilling. And so a little bit about the Youth Voice program. We help former and current foster youth through educational workshops, writing and poetry contests. We have paid contributor roles. We have intensive fellowships. And so basically the Youth Voice provides writing opportunities to young people who have lived experience with the child welfare system and juvenile justice and the juvenile justice system. We also advocate for youth who have experienced homelessness as well, because we know that all three of those can go hand in hand. And so below, you guys will see that if you want to stay informed about any of our upcoming events, any of our writing opportunities that we have, any of the conversations that we have up going when we're seeking panelists, we have our newsletter, which you can subscribe to, and also our social media handles, which you can feel free to add and follow us to stay informed as well. And so at this time, you will see a poll pop up on your screen. And this is just for us to assess, how did you hear about us? Whether you're a former or current foster youth, what role you play, just so that we can, better get our information out and be able to share our different opportunities and everything with you all. And so you should see some results popping up on your screen soon as well. We're just going to allow some time for some other folks to join in and get their selection selected. All right, so we have some foster youth and current, both and former, which is always good. We have some adoptive parents, which I always love to see. Some social workers. We have people who help advocate for foster youth. So it's really, really like a diverse group. I love to see it. You guys continue to please stick around, introduce yourself in the chat. Where do you work at? Say hi. If you have any questions for our panelists as we get into our discussion, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we're going to try to get to those after towards the end of this webinar. Thank you to all of you all who participated. So at this time, I would love to introduce our lovely panelists. And some of our panelists have actually participated in some of our webinars before, which is always great to be able to re-engage our youth, our young writers. And then lastly, we have some new panelists, which I'm very, very and always happy to have. And so the first person that I'm going to introduce, and Jessica, you can just feel free to just wave or come on screen and wave and say hi, or just say hi in the chat, whichever one you guys prefer. But Jessica Allen is queer, which I love that you put that first. She's Afro-Latino. She's a mother, she's a doula, she's a visionary with relentless determination to ignite her communities towards larger scale revolution and intergenerational healing. At 17, she became a certified doula through the Natural Birth Institute in San Francisco. And through this work, she has proudly supported over 100 births in her community and addressed chronic stress, social isolation, and emotional hardship within her practice. She is an ethics studies major at UC Berkeley and on the educational pathway that will lead to her obtaining her PhD in Africana Studies with the specific intent to serve under-resourced populations in academia. As a future professor and educator, her mission is to pilot more initiatives and funding for study abroad programs for marginalized pregnant and parenting LGBTQ families. She has also been in the service to San Francisco Bay Area most disenfranchised populations. And as a doula, she wants to help facilitate healthy pregnancies, births, and postpartum workshops. So Jessica, thank you so much for being here. She is also a single mother of a 16-year-old daughter, and she currently resides in Berkeley. So Jessica, thank you so much for being here today to be able to share your perspective. It is a pleasure to have you, and I'm definitely looking forward to hearing all that you have to share once we get into the discussion. Up next, we have Cynthia Perez, which I did see her come in. Hi, Cynthia. Cynthia is a single parent whose hobbies include singing, volunteering, swimming, hiking, and playing video games, which I love. Cynthia hopes to become an actress one day, and we are always here to support you, Cynthia. And so next we have Deshaun D. Ranks, which we just will refer to him as D. D. Ranks is the musical, creative, and spiritual advisor from Los Angeles, California. He was born to a teen mom who was diagnosed with bipolar schizophrenia and admitted to a psychiatric institution shortly thereafter, and an incarcerated father. He was bounced around with various family members until the state eventually stepped in and placed him in foster care system at the age of 13. He remained in foster care until he was 18, and by the time he reached his 30s, D-Rank had been to nearly every institution within the system. That includes foster homes, group homes, halfway homes, juvenile halls, boot camps, county jails and prisons, which we, as I said before, MD, we share similar experiences. These such experiences have attributed to him being considered a troubled foster youth who felt unloved and lacked the proper influence. He went from being sentenced to 10 years in prison at the age of 18 to being released nearly 9 years later in hopes of finding his place within society. As he matured, so did his understanding of his life purpose. He took the time to study himself, and his spirituality, different philosophies, and embarking on his spiritual journey ultimately helped change the trajectory of his life and put him on the pathway where he decided to go stray away from from self-destruction. And so now he uses his music as an outlet for self-expression and storytelling with an intention of inspiring and enlightening his audience members. So we want to thank you, Dee, for being here again and joining us. Really, 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 really appreciate you. And so next we have Jawan, which is one of our former Minnesota Youth Voice contributors who just graduated this past December. And I'm very, very happy to see him because I haven't seen him in a while. Jawan was born in Chicago, Illinois. He currently lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He was in foster care from 14 to the age of 18, and then he went into extended care until 21. He attended Hennepin Tech for computer technology. He also plans to make a difference by helping with preventative plans for helping with preventative plans for foster youth, as well as using his experience to help others tell their stories in a motivational way. And so thank you again, Jawan, for being here today. It's really, really good to see you. And so, last but not least, we have our lovely Youth Voice assistant and intern, Tamar. And so Tamar is obtaining her bachelor's degree in communications as well as an associate's degree in liberal arts. She's an active member on her campus involved in programs such as the Guardian Scholars, the EOP program, the speech and debate team, as well as being a part of 2 honor societies in the communication and psychology studies department. Her workforce journey has led her into a creative marketing field with the emphasis on digital marketing, social media marketing, and brand management. She's passionate about corporate social responsibility, specifically how media companies impact society as a whole. And her passions include promoting her self-advocacy for herself and others to bring change to social injustices. Her way of doing this is by using her voice to uplift others with her story through podcasts and journalism, which is one of the reasons why she is our assistant for the Youth Voice program. And so Tamar, thank you so much for joining us. I know you had a quiz and you had to get in and get out, but we really, really appreciate you for being. And so the moment that everyone has all been waiting for, and so I would like to open up the floor. As said before, we're going to be diving into a really, really powerful discussion. If you are an audience member who would like to ask any of our panelists specific questions, please drop them in the chat and we will try to get to as many as we can. And we also will be responding in the chat. I will be calling on you guys. If you would like to answer the question, if it's like in dire need, please just let me know. If I missed you, just by unmuting yourself or raising your hand so that I can know. But other than that, thank you all again for being here today. And yes, let's get this conversation started. And so I wanted to start this conversation off with just asking you all to share a little bit about your background as it relates to being in the foster care system, how that transition was for you going into college, and as you were, discovering, being a parent and all of those above. And so I'll start it off with Jawan, and then you all can just jump right in and unmute yourself because I want everyone to answer this question. Thank you.
So I went into foster care as a teen. So I was in foster care at the age of 14. And then I aged out of the foster care, and then went into what they call the extended foster care, where I just had a social worker kind of checking in with me till I was 21. So, um, and then you said to talk about the transition, like in between, like college and parenthood. Is
Yes,
that
like
what I'm understanding?
yes, I'm like from your transition from foster care to college. How was that for you?
For me, for the transition from foster care to college, um, it was very hard, but I did it. I was determined to do it. So that's just kind of how I've been. You know, if I put my mind to it, I go with it. But when you talk about some children, because at the time I was a child who need kind of direction and support, I didn't really have that coming from my foster family of too much, my social workers of too much. I just had a lady at school who cared enough about me to help me apply for different and various colleges, and you know, I was a good student and everything, or else I probably would have never even went, you know, kind of in that direction. Um, but um, the transition was very difficult. You know, kind of living chaotically, you know, going from foster home, shelter to shelters. It was kind of difficult to, um, you know, have that sense of freedom. I didn't really know what to do with it. So college for me looked like a lot of partying, a lot of coping is now what I look at it and identify it as. But I was doing a lot of partying, a lot of, you know, drinking, drugs, whatever, just because there was a lot of things, a lot of trauma that I didn't properly heal from, that no one was talking about, that I didn't identify because I didn't understand what it was until a little bit later on in life. And now I could look back and, of course, identify those things. But so college for me, I ended up leaving college actually, and I ended up going to the service. Um, Once again, I was just kind of jumping from kind of career to, you know, just different things in life because I just was trying to find my place kind of in the world, you know. So I did the military for a couple of years. And, you know, after that, you know, I came out once again. I still had all of this stuff that I didn't deal with, all of this trauma that I hadn't healed from. So I ended up getting in a relationship with um, a woman who was a different race than me, and the reason that I say that is that is very important to, you know, my sense of fatherhood and, you know, just kind of my story. It was kind of like I got with this woman because she was the furthest thing away from my mother. So it was like, you know, that's how my son actually came about, you know, was having a child kind of out of resentment for my mother, which once again, now, you know, I'll never say that to him. He's my biggest blessing. But now looking back, I identified that that's how that relationship even transpired. Um, but yeah, I have a 4-year-old son. He just turned 4 yesterday. So, you know, just celebrate his birthday and just being able to be a full-time father and, you know, be the person that he looks up to, being able to set a positive example and, uh, you know, teach him, breaking that kind of that generational curse that not a lot of people talk about, um, you know, so yeah, that's about me. Hopefully I answered all of the points or got to the
Yes,
points.
thank you. Thank you. So I'll pass this same question over to Tamar. So Tamar, just give a brief, you know, background of your foster care experience and how that transition was to college, and then you becoming a parent.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I actually exited care when I was 12. Before that, I never really knew my dad. My mom was insane. She was mentally ill with bipolar and schizophrenia, and she started to self-medicate. So I would say, put my dad through a lot of pain, and that pain kind of went into our relationship as I got older. And we had like a restraining order against him. He was never really allowed to see me. And when he would come to our house, she would like run him out, and like physically abuse him. It was really bad. And I remember like every day, like cops would literally be at our house, I would say at least every other night. And it got gradually worse as the years went on. And I eventually was taken from her. And none of my extended family was allowed to take me back because of like the things she said about them, which I believed. I was really brainwashed. I remember I had to write a letter and like read it in front of a judge about everything wrong my dad did. And I remember like he didn't do any of the stuff that she said, she did it. I remember being a little girl and thinking like, why is this woman like making me write this, like my mom? And she never tried to get me back. I actually haven't seen her since the night I was taken from her. I actually got taken from her on Christmas. And I didn't realize until our previous webinar we had about the holidays that kind of left a lot of trauma in me that I never realized before. And when my dad eventually was able to take me back from the family that I had been placed with, we had this really strained relationship. And he's not very, I wouldn't say educated, but he's not educated in like mental health and like how that impacts. And I remember my social worker made me go to like a couple months of therapy. And then it was like, oh, that doesn't matter, and I never had to go back and my case was closed. And my dad didn't believe in therapy. I started acting out really bad and our relationship was just terrible. It still is terrible, but he blamed me and he even would verbally say it like he thought it was my fault that I even was in foster care in the first place. He would say like, well, you should have known better, and like defend me in court. And like he doesn't understand that like a child, isn't capable of like understanding the complexities of that type of situation. And I started doing a lot of drugs and drinking and just sleeping with everybody when I was really young. I actually got pregnant at 15 and it was a really bad relationship. It was really toxic, and luckily me and my child's father now are in a really good place, but it took a long time to get there. And my dad, he was a single dad and he worked out of town. So I basically continued raising myself from the time I was placed with him. And then all of a sudden I had a baby and like no support system. So my best friend's family, credits to them, they actually were the ones who really helped me stay in school and finish and helped me watch the kids so I could go back to high school, in person, and encouraged me to like kind of change my life around. And I would like to say that it was an easy transition. Like you have a kid and you automatically think, oh, wow, like, like I'm going to do everything for them. But for me, it actually took me a while. And I realized I had a lot of trauma and I started to like not really deal with it, but I started to kind of push it away and I let it build up, And by the time that college went around, that was kind of when it hit me like, oh, like I should do this, and I didn't really have a passion to go to college or anything. I was always really smart, but I felt like I shouldn't go for some reason, like I wasn't deserving of going. And it was really difficult being so young and having a toddler, and a lot of people I knew were getting pregnant when they were 18, like in general from high school. And it was like a huge deal to them. And I remember feeling really bitter because I was so young when I had my son. And it was kind of like they would complain about how hard it was for them. And I would sit there like subconsciously, and I would never say this to someone, but I'd be like, are you kidding me? Like I had a kid after all this that I went through in my life at 15, and I would get really angry. And that anger just kept growing and growing. And it wasn't until I had a couple professors actually that I took on classes that regarded like mental health and like trauma and family that I started to like deal with my shit. And it was really, really horrible. And I'm kind of in this growth phase where I've overcome a lot of that. And I'm starting to like put things into place and like self-reflect. And it's really helped me grow as a person and in my relationship with my son. He's now 5. And it's definitely like I'm still in college, I'm really young still, and it's definitely like a growing process like every day. And I feel like the older he gets, the more like happy I am because I get to raise him and teach him how to be a good man. And for me, I grew up with a crazy mother, and then I had a really abusive father too, and then none of it ever made sense to me. And my biggest joy is definitely that keeps me going would have to be like just his name's Clay, him like knowing that I'm raising him to be like a good person and like he's going to treat people hopefully different than the people that how they treated me. And that's kind of like the challenges that I faced, and managing everything is rough, but it's definitely, I'm excited to be old one day and to look back on this portion of my life and kind of reflect as an old woman. Like that is something that really just excites me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tamar. Thank you. I appreciate you for sharing your perspective. I will pass this question on to Deshaun. To Deshaun, and then Jessica, you can follow up right after him.
Peace. Can you hear me good? Okay, cool. So, yeah, I emancipated out of the foster care system at 18 years old. And I ended up going to an independent living program out in San Dimas. So we had it was like a shared house with like 3 other independent living former foster youth or former foster children. We were still like foster youth technically. And, I ended up going to college for about a year or so, but it was mainly because I was learning about, the rules that were required to be inside of the independent living program. Like you have to go to school and or have a job. They pay a majority of the expenses. So I was like looking at it as an opportunity to like really like, stack up my money. And then when I started learning about different grants that come from being a foster youth and being in these programs and going to college, I was literally trying to just take advantage of as much as possible. But Jawan had said something that it resonated with me as well in terms of, going to college and, having all of this freedom now. So like for me, it was like really like turn up season 1,000,000%. Like I was literally just like, even like a lot of the grant money, I didn't even use it for what you're supposed to use it for as far as like books and board and so on and so forth. Like I went and bought a car, like I was buying jewelry, like I was doing whatever I wanted to do until I ultimately landed in legal trouble and I ended up going to prison for a while. And while I was in there, I took those time to really like reflect on, where I went wrong and so on and so forth. A lot of that through that stint, I was able to keep communication with some of my friends that I met within the foster system. And one of them, she's my daughter's mother now. And we really stayed in contact, more so towards like the last few years of me being in prison. And when I came home, we started up a relationship, but there was a lot of trauma, that neither one of us had dealt with from our own childhoods, from just being, former foster youth. And, she never knew her father. And I had a strained relationship with my mother, and she had a strained relationship with her mother. And, those things were carried over into, our own parenting in our own types of ways. Like, I wasn't really regarded as, a real voice in my daughter's life. Like it took a real battle for me to kind of go back against the notion that, just because I'm a man doesn't mean that I'm not a good father, or, a child needs the father just as much as they need the mother. And also it was a battle with the courts because things that was being done, it was like the courts were kind of like overlooking that. And with the background of former foster youth and going to prison and so on and so forth, it was like the odds were really stacked against me in that regard. So I really had to like shell out a lot of money to lawyers and, kind of have somebody who would really hear my story and would battle for me. Ultimately, I ended up with joint physical and legal custody of my daughter, who is now 5. She just had her solar return was in January, my little Capricorn baby. And, she's my twin. I love her. Like we literally, if I shaved off my mustache, she would look exactly like me. But there was a stint where it was like 2 years where I was not allowed to even see her because we were going through the courts. And as long as nothing was set in stone in courts, like legally she can do whatever until there's something in court that she's going against. So there was like a drag out battle for 2 years of her, not letting me see my daughter, not letting me speak to her. And then when she did let me speak to her, there was moments of me being able to talk to her, but short, and she would be sitting right there with her. And, it was just me really understanding that, this is levels of trauma. This is how she views, males, because she didn't have an example from her father, and every woman that she knows has, these baby daddy issues. So these stories get made up in the minds and they start to get projected. And that was something I was dealing with. And at times I would really fall victim to the circumstance, and I would get frustrated, and I would spaz out, I would yell, I would cry, and then it would be like, oh, block, did it again. Now you ain't gonna talk to your daughter for another 2 months. And it would be like that back and forth notion. Finally I ended up getting physical and legal custody 50-50. And as soon as the ink was wet on the paper, I sent for my daughter because she had ultimately ended up moving to Houston and I was still staying in California. So I had to like fly down and pick my daughter up. And now we do the thing where it's like literally back and forth. I just moved to Atlanta, so I'm a little bit closer. It's a little shorter plane ride, but now it's like every 2 months, like my daughter's with me. And then, 2 months she's with her mom. And like, we really go, string like back and forth with my daughter. And we're in a better place than we were. But in and of self, it's kind of hard for me to unsee after everything that transpired. So I do regard her, because I see how much my daughter, loves and adores her mother. So I regard her with respect and appreciation in that light. But other than that, I don't try to, be friends and so on and so forth, because I still have, the trauma that was happened over the last situation. And now I'm back in school. Now I go to 1500 Sound Academy. So I'm going to school to be an engineer, and a sound engineer to produce, and I'll be able to record, be like officially certified in all of the music softwares. And, being able to juggle school. And when I have my daughter with me, it's like, I have her set up her laptop or her tablet, and she does her school, and she'll be sitting right next to me, and I'll be with my school. It becomes, I learned to juggle and balance it out, but it's like really worth it. And, even the times when she's not with me, and, sometimes she may not want to, she don't care about the phone or the tablet. So she doesn't want to do these type of calls, these video chats and stuff. So I have to like really respect her, know that she's growing in her own personality, and kind of give her space. But for me, it's really a continuous learning game, because the things that I've implemented in my life, I've never had a model to see how this stuff was done. And I just try to let her be as much of a free soul and a free spirit as possible, without trying to lord over her or even push her away, dealing with the fact that she's over there half the time, she's with her dad half the time. So I don't try to pry too much, because we already had situations where the phone would be on block and I wouldn't be able to speak to her for months on end. So I literally try to like tread. And the more she's with me, the more we communicate. It seems like she's more lenient towards me. And we had a breakthrough not too long ago. She called me randomly like last week and was like, "Daddy, I want to come back to your house. I got my bags packed and my toys." And I was just like, oh, but I had to explain to her like, oh, me and mommy have a schedule, so you have to stay with mommy until June. But it's literally like just a balance of like trying to go back and forth. Yeah, and just, I don't know, did I answer everything?
Yes, you did. You did great. And I appreciate your perspectives. Like for real, for real. I'll be telling you, we have a lot of stuff in common. So it makes value when you speak. And I'm like, yep, see, I told him I had that experience too. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I wanted to make sure that see if Cynthia was still in the audience, because didn't get any communication. Cynthia,
Yes, I'm still here. I'm just
okay.
listening.
Like,
Sorry.
because I want to make sure that I get to you too as well. So Jessica is going to answer the question, and then Cynthia, you can come on and you can answer, and then we'll
Okay,
dive
perfect.
into the question.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be a part of this panel. Everyone's so phenomenal, and their stories of resiliency is very inspiring. Let's see, to answer the question, I went into foster care at 12, and I went through group homes, all that, and navigated a lot of trauma through that. But when I became pregnant, I was 15. And at the time, it was a cohesive parenting situation, a relationship. That eventually changed. So I became a single parent along the years of, ups and downs, topsy-turvy experiences with the relationship. As everyone has been sharing, kind of like, it's interesting when, there's like undealt and unprocessed trauma and how that impacts your perception, your lens, and how you see the other person. Doesn't necessarily mean that that person is a bad person or the binary thought of what is a good person. It's just that everyone is holding their own trauma. So I really appreciate this perspective that we're really bringing into this conversation. But outside of that, being a single parent has not been easy. When I, emancipated from foster care, I was 18, went through some of the, living situations where it was couch to couch, and it was like, going through some programming that was like housing assistance, and did all that. But I immediately went into work. I didn't go right to college. I immediately started the process of getting and collecting service work opportunities and experiences. So I did the AmeriCorps, and that kind of like piloted me to gain a lot of experiences working in the community. So as, previous teen parent navigating as an 18-year-old fresh adult, I went to AmeriCorps and I got a position being a case manager for other teen parents at Berkeley High School. So that was my kind of catalyst to start working as in nonprofit sector. And simultaneously, I was able to continue my doula practice, working with pregnant folks and just using that experiences of like nurturing and holding and supporting parenting families and, pregnant folks, and just being able to like, be a part of that birthing experience and doing education on like what's happening to your body, what is like happening during the whole process of birth, and also just advocating for, folks who are navigating the hospitals, because it was just a lot of additional biases. And as we know, like Black women have the highest rate of death during birth. So that's been kind of my experience, is supporting my people and being a doula and a stand for that, for healthy birth outcomes. So I did that for many years. I'd say a whole decade. I did a lot of doing nonprofit work. I've worked at Walden House, so substance abuse counseling. After that, I worked at a mental health agency called A Better Way, and I worked with former foster care youth, and also just, freshly like families that have had interruption with CPS and trying to support them to reunify. So I collected all this professional experience, worked with LGBT youth in the Castro at Lyric in San Francisco. And after 10 years, I got burnt out. I was just like, I am so exhausted. I'm tired. This is a lot of vicarious trauma I was holding, and also just being like completely undervalued, underpaid, and just like working nonstop and trying to be a doula and trying to be a mom and being a single parent. So it was just so much weight and exhaustion. And I just felt like, again, these organizations are white capped, they're white executives, and they're just like really very much, I got a lot of trauma working within the nonprofits sector. So I was like, that's not me. I know exactly what I don't want to do. So I was really grateful that I had that perception of like, I didn't go right to college after high school. I wanted to figure out like what it is I really wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And that was the catalyst for me going back to City College, San Francisco. I was in the beginning, I was kind of dwindling, like fresh of high school. I was like, yeah, taking classes I thought were fun or interesting. But by the time I was done with like that whole decade and exhaustion, I was like, it's game time. I got to put all the work in. I'm not good at math. So I was like, I got to finally focus on that and, deal with that. And I studied it every day, went to the math lab. I worked my butt off and finally landed the opportunity to transfer, graduated City College. I had 4 schools that accepted me, and I decided UC Berkeley, and it was a very pivotal, amazing moment. I did some study abroad. I went to Cuba. I went to London to do some studying. So when I came back, and it was over just a summer. So my daughter, who is now 16, and is the most spirited, hilarious kid on the planet. She is truly my, one of my biggest accomplishments. And she's been through, all of this with me, right by my side. And being a single parent is rewarding. And it's also like, you never really see the fruits of your labor. But I feel like now that she's older, I can see like little glimmers of the things that I've very much intentionally tried to deposit as a parent, like of values and of things that I feel like I want her to leave, of being a good person and loving herself and, valuing her existence and knowing she's worthy, like all those things. She's starting to kind of come into that. So it's been a true testament to my hard work as a single parent. And the other day I was actually talking to one of my friends we've been teen parents together. We went to high school together and we were raising our kids together. And I was just like, I'm getting emotional because my daughter's about to be 17. She's turning 17 this Monday, upcoming Monday. And it's just like, I can't believe it, and like, I'm here as like a single parent still. And I wish I could have and share that opportunity with another person that we collaborated on this baby. Like, let's see how big this, how amazing this little star is blooming. And it's just that kind of hurts sometimes as a single parent. So that's what I lead with. But, going to UC Berkeley, it's very rigorous. It's the most challenging experiences of my life right now, but I'm being challenged in such a good way, and simultaneously being able to support my daughter navigate high school. And we all know how high school is. So, but I'm so grateful that I don't have no headaches with my daughter. She is a good kid. And like I said, she's truly like my rock. And I mean, she's just magic. So, but navigating college, I did it the very unorthodox trajectory. So I went through work experience, like, I don't want to do these things. I thought I wanted to be a social worker. I thought I wanted to be a psychologist. Glad I didn't do that. And I'm glad that I'm pursuing what I'm currently doing. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And congratulations to raising an awesome 17-year-old, soon to be 17-year-old. Like, I'm hearing you say, and just the smile that came with that. Like, I'm like looking at my baby right now, and I'm just like trying to hold on to all the small days right now, because I know it's not gonna be like a lot. There's not gonna be like a lot. It's just gonna get older. So thank you so much for sharing that, sharing your beautiful perspective, and we're gonna get some more into it. Last but not least, I want to bring on Cynthia to share a little bit about her experience and transition from foster care into college, and how that shaped your parenthood too as well as you became a parent.
Hi, my name is Cynthia. So my transition to college was pretty honestly, I had a hard time because I was in an abusive relationship with my son's father. He had a problem with like drug habits and gangs and stuff like that. So when I first met him, he like was like, like, well, he had his issues and his like battles and stuff like that. But like I guess as soon as like I had my son and I was pregnant, like he went down a different route and like basically kind of like brought me down with him, like by being abusive and putting his hands and cheating and stuff like that. So basically, like I had got my son taken away because of his actions, and life has been pretty rough because like I had to literally pack my things and leave my family home and leave my child when he was 2 months old because of the situation that like his father had like basically like caused. And like I basically lost a lot for dealing with someone that was like very toxic, and he would sit there and like just hack my social medias and pretend to be me and like put his hands on me. And my son and me were a high risk pregnancy, and I had almost lost my life and my son's life because of him. And so far like my experience leaving foster, like it's been pretty chaotic because like for a minute I wasn't able to really figure out resources or how to get help because like it was kind of like hard, like from like living in a good situation to having to figure it out on your own. I felt like very alone and like I didn't know what I could do next, not having my family or my child. And I feel like it kind of like affected me in the long run because I got a lot of trauma now and I'm not able to focus as much in school and, like having to be worried about how your child's doing without you being there for him. It's kind of hard for myself as a mother not being able to be near my son because of this certain situation. And I feel like like they didn't really help me in some type of way, like to guide me and like basically tell me what I should do to like further myself, because I felt like I tried so hard to like figure it out on my own, but I didn't get no type of like, how can I say, like one-on-one help, like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do, or, like basically teach me like how to like basically live on my own. Cause I was so used to like living in foster homes and then going back home, aging out, and then having my child, and then having to get my child taken was kind of like, it was just too much to handle. So like right now, I feel like I'm having a hard time like getting resources to be able to graduate from school. And like being a parent like changed me because basically like having my son and then the next not having him like affected me a lot in my life and my daily life, like goals and things that I really wanted to pursue. I feel like for the most part I've been really motivated and I've been trying very hard, but sometimes it's very like emotionally draining not being able to have your family or your child and being worried about like, oh, how are they, and then having to worry about your personal life and how to better yourself when it's just you. And like I feel like the foster system didn't really help me, like tell me like, oh, this is what you have to do when you age out. Like I just feel like they basically just like, how can I say, like just threw me out to the world, I guess. Like they didn't really like show us like, oh, this is what you should do when you're growing up, or like teach us basic needs or like basic ways to like be social, or like basically just like things that we need to do in a basic life, like daily life routine, like I feel like they didn't really do that. Like it was more like, oh, like therapy or groups and stuff like that. I really feel like they didn't like teach us like, oh, how to like get a job, or this is how you do resumes. Like sometimes I felt like they didn't really do their jobs in certain places that I was in. Like it was more like, oh, do it on your own, you can figure it out type thing. And I feel like that's kind of like where the system like doesn't understand that some kids do not have an advantage as other kids, where they have like their family or people supporting them, and then us, it's like, oh, we have to learn it all on our own and figure it out like how you can, which is pretty hard in my eyes, because at the end of the day, it's like we went from being locked and being in a big setting with a lot of people to just getting placed somewhere and not knowing how to figure it out, or how to even go and do certain things that would help you in the long run as an adult.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Cynthia, for sharing your perspective. As you all can tell, this panelist is made up of a diverse and unique group of former foster youth. We all come from different backgrounds and different, situations. But as you can tell, it has the system has shaped us, and it has affected how we, have developed in life, and in particular, how our parenting, how we became parents, how we, our parenting skills, how we operate, from a parenting compass. All of those things, play a huge role in, what we're doing now and what we want, what we expect to get out of parenthood. And so, again, thank you all for sharing your perspective and your journey into, from foster care into college, and your different journey as it relates to you becoming a parent. And so my next question is, I want to know, how was your education affected, and what barriers did you feel like you faced because of you becoming a parent? And, whether that's after college, because I actually became a parent after college, but the reason why I wasn't a parent during college and before college is because I simply just was in fear of, because I was a foster youth, that my child was going to be taken away from me, even though that I was like well off financially and in a better space. That was still something that like sat in the back of my head, and kind of hindered me from, wanting to be a parent and actually enjoy that experience. And I'm glad I did. And so what were some of the barriers that you think that you faced as it relates to you, transitioning into becoming a parent, and, being a former foster youth? And I will kick that question over to Jessica.
Okay, just so I make sure that I heard everything, can you just repeat the last part of that question, just so that I can share?
Yes. So basically, I just want to know, what are some of the barriers that you faced as you were transitioning to your parenthood, whether that, impacted how you pursue college, which I know that you shared, how you took a different route that wasn't orthodox to how some people would say our pathway should go. So what were some of the barriers that you faced as you were becoming the parent and, transitioning from out of foster care and dealing with that trauma?
Yeah. I really appreciate that. That question. I think that institutional barriers are, sometimes the most, challenging, because it's like, we were not, I mean, from my experience, I was never really expected to go to college, or wasn't affirmed in that way with, like, as a high schooler. Like, I didn't get that from too many people. So it just was something that was that was like a self-driven goal. But I think ultimately being a parent, a lot of the experiences I think were rooted in what are the constructions of poverty. I was sharing a little bit in disclosure about my experience of being in a relationship that was rooted in like a lot of trauma, and like obviously, you know, colliding together, it was lots of lessons, soul lessons, right? And having to experience those things were not easy. But I think like poverty is what was the hugest, like the most significant barrier for me. And I was a CalWORKs, food stamp, and recipient, and being someone that, you know, had to be on waiting lists for housing, had to be on waiting lists for childcare, like managing just the basic needs of like trying to get started to get to a goal was really challenging. But I will say, honestly, like being in a reflective moment, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to rise, and like I'm grateful that I recognize that I have privilege in like being someone that was very high functioning and able to manage it. Being like, I definitely prioritize my mental health before anything. Going to therapy on a weekly basis is one of the things of how what I strive to do so that I can persevere through those barriers. And, you know, highlighting like having a very good friend group who had aligned values and were just as supportive for me and affirmed me and helps me, you know, make those perseverance through barriers. So those were like the things that were like, what really helped me overcome was I've always been someone that has valued and prioritized healing. So regardless of institutional barriers, that's not going to stop someone who has that determination. So that's my perspective.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica. I can listen to you talk all day about your experiences, for real. And it's a great perspective to have. And that's exactly why these type of discussions and forums are so important, because these are not the conversations that are being had in being able to even show foster youth that, yes, you actually, you know, had some hiccups, but you can still make it out, you know, and be successful and raise successful children, therefore after the fact. And so thank you so much. I want to pass that question, that same question over to Dee. So Deshawn, can you just give us a brief background on some of your barriers that you faced while you were transitioning into fatherhood after surviving the foster care system?
Yes. For me, I always had, just from how traumatic my childhood was, and you know, before foster youth, when I was, you know, going through the rigmarole with my mom and living with every family member who would take me in, and even finally going through the foster care system, I was like, literally as a child, making mental notes. Like, when I have a child, I'm not gonna do this. When I have a child, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna do this. And I think it's kind of crazy how, you know, as a child, you even think about those type of things. Like, you know, so for me, I'm like literally just hell bent on not having my daughter experience those type of feelings. You know, like I would rather you know, cry about not getting 2 popsicles than you and saying stuff like, I want to get 2 popsicles, as opposed to, you know, going to bed without food. It's like, for me, I feel like there's a level of extra protectiveness, you know, like like I said earlier, there's not like a blueprint or anybody to like follow in doing this, but all I know is, you know, I don't need anyone to step in to do this for me. So I really keep that energy really strong and really potent when it comes to, you know, my daughter. And I also have a 6-month-old who was also birthed by a doula and a midwife at home. So that's pretty dope. But like with her, I really feel like, you know, I I'm overprotective of her well-being, and you know, and her mental health. And like even when she's playing with other kids, like I be kind of like lingering just to make sure there's no bullying and no weird stuff going on. I really like feel like there's an extra level of caution that goes into this, because like, I don't know, I might go kamikaze if the police ever feel like they can just step in and try to do my job. If they feel like they can put her in some type of situation or a system and make me have to battle the courts to even deal with her. You know, like, her mother is a great mom, and I feel like I'm a great father. So for us, it's just staying great to the children, or to our daughter, to ensure that they don't experience none of the things that we dealt with to even get to the system. So for me, I feel like there is always a level of extra care that goes into the parenting, just to avoid any of that stuff. Like, I wouldn't necessarily, you know, that on social media they're doing a gentle parenting thing and all that, but I wouldn't do that. But there is another level of like, I'm not hitting my child, and you know, I'm not yelling and screaming at them in public or even at home and stuff like that. Like, I just let my nose be nose. And I know that as a father, I didn't even know that the power of this, but as a father, I can raise my voice and I'll be good. Did not, I said no. And I won. Like, there's no, like, I don't got to do nothing else. So it's like just learning these little key things and these key components when parenting, and be like, oh, that worked. I put that in the bag. And still, like, I don't want to say keeping it in the back of my mind, because now I know as an adult, you know, with lived experiences, that certain things, it's just not in my character. I would never do, period. So I don't even have to say, oh, I would never do that to my child, or I would never do this or that. Like, there's literally just a level of me like, okay, I got this. Just moving forward, and just having that's another thing too, communicating with my daughter. Like, honestly, communicating with her. I don't talk to her like a child. I talk to her like a human, like a being, a person. I let her talk to me. You know, we literally go back and forth, just to really communicate. I want to know where she at, how she's developing, you know. But for me, it's the extra care that's what it's all about, just that extra care.
Thank you, Dee. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective, and just seeing that smile that you have when you're talking about your baby girls. It just, you know, it's just, you know, that's what it's for. That's what it's for. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure when I was putting this panel together is that there were male representation, so that that people that are in our audience, whether they're former foster youth, the current foster youth, they can see good male role models and know that there are single parents out there that are fathers that come from the system as well, that, you know, also struggle within their own right, but they are, you know, being successful in the parent, you know, the parent department. And so you are one of those successful people. And so thank you so much for answering that question. And so my next question, I want to pass it over to Tamar. Tamar, I wanted to know if you can describe some of the social impacts that took place as you were, you know, in your parenthood and transitioning into college and transitioning out of the foster care system. How did it impact, you know, your social life? How did it impact your, you know, the support that you got from your peers and the support that you got from your family?
Yeah, so, oh my gosh. So one thing that I really struggle with is I think I'm too self-advocating, if that could be a thing. When I feel disrespected, I make it known to, I don't care, like, if you're older than, you know, like, if that is disrespectful, I am going to say something. And I have really struggled with just institutional barriers that have affected just like through the social construct. So what I mean by that is, I usually message all my professors, you know, saying, oh, I'm a young mom, you know, just letting you know, like, I literally don't have someone that can just go pick up my kid if he's sick. Like, I have to do that. I have to do everything. and his dad literally lives in another state. So it's also like that long commute, you know, like, so I don't have anyone. And I always let them know because of absences and stuff like that. And they're usually okay. And some of them are like, well, that's just against the rules, even though technically through Title IX, which I've done my own research, they actually are supposed to give you, you know, extra time for situations like that. And I faced it, just judgment from professors, you know, a lot, really bad too. And some are really supportive, but other times, like I've messaged them and they're expecting me to be an older student. And then I come in and I'm really young, and then they have like a instant bias, which is really frustrating. It's hard in classes as well, because I take a lot of classes revolving like kind of psychology and communication, to a lot of stuff about the family, and we have to get personal and we're graded on it. So it's hard to talk about being a young mom because people my age, you know, will start looking, and it's just a lot of judgment there. It's really hard because I feel like the constant need to like fit in and like be relatable, and people either feel like, not threatened is the right word, but they don't know how to relate to me, you know? So it's hard to make close bonds with people my age. And it's also really frustrating because as you try to be social, they assume you aren't going to hang out with them. So then you start to lose friendships, you know, you start to kind of gain them. And it's just this constant like weird balance that doesn't really work ever. Another thing that just I worry about is my son's social life. At his daycare is a great center. It's on my campus. They have like goats and a farm and everything. So I got really lucky, like amazing, like giant tortoises, the whole deal. And I have issues with the teachers there because they assume that because I'm young, I'm just not a qualified parent. I've had them literally say, oh, like if you need parenting advice, like I did not ask you, you know, like don't try to give me advice. Like I know how to handle this myself. And arguably so, I would say I might know how to handle a little better because I'm closer to Clay's age. So I remember, like, I've had times where they've tried to like get my son in trouble for things that I remember doing. And I'd be like, do you not remember doing that? And they were like, no. And I'm like, well, I do. And I know how to deal with this, like, you know, and just like advocating for my son is so just hard for me. And it makes me so angry because I remember I was just really judged by adults when I was a kid, and like teachers and friends' parents, because of being in the system. I went to a small Christian school, and parents would gossip about me and my family, and you know how I wasn't living at home anymore. And I remember just feeling constantly criticized by every adult in my life and every peer my age, and it kind of stuck with me. So now when I feel threatened, or my son's threatened, you know, by an authority or by kids, like I just get so mad. Like, and he, like a teacher the other day recently was trying to say how he argues, and he argues too much, and I've seen it happen. I know my son, he talks a lot like I do, and he always wants to like ask questions, you know, about everything, and he kind of gets annoyed if you're not listening to him, or like if you misunderstand what he says, he'll be like, no, like I meant this, and he gets really frustrated about not being heard correctly. And I know how to handle that, but for some reason his teacher didn't, and she was trying to like punish him for just communicating. And I actually brought out some facts that I had learned like in my psych class, and I was like, actually developmentally, and just went on a whole little mansplaining tangent about why she was wrong. And I remember she like was shocked and like didn't know what to say. And it's hard because people don't take you seriously socially, and like it's hard to bond with your peers. And it's definitely like this weird gap. I kind of wish I did it the other route, you know, like worked and then went back to school. And I don't know if any of you know this, but less than 2% of teen parents get a degree by 30. I just turned 21, and I'm going to be finished with school in like 2 years. So I'm like, which is really cool, you know, and exciting, because I'm like, they don't even have statistics on people like me, but it also creates these challenges like socially and just systematic barriers. There's no resources for people like me, you know, like they expect everyone my age to not have a kid. And when there's someone like me, no one knows how to act, you know, like they don't know what to do. And it really just affects how they treat you. And it's obvious too. So I think the hardest part is like advocating for myself and just understanding that not everyone is educated in this stuff, and like having compassion and grace for people's lack of knowledge, you know, like they're not wrong for not knowing, but I feel like it's so important to change the way that we view parents in college that are young. It's definitely like this systematic thing.
Thank you so much, Tamar, for sharing. You're doing a good job too, as well. I know from you in the background, and you like a real life warrior. Like you be like in 8 different places, still be making sure you pick your son up from school, and so those are all things to be proud of, especially with you doing all of this stuff and going to school. You definitely make me proud, girl. So I'm sure I'm almost positive that you're making Clay as proud, just as proud. And so thank you so much for sharing. So unfortunately, I want to make sure that we'll at least be able to get to some questions in the audience, but I didn't see any in the chat. And so I wanted to seg into this final question because I want to make sure that everybody is able to chime in at least briefly about some advice. So if you all could offer just like a key positive advice to, someone that's out there in the world, current, former foster youth, dealing with, transitioning from the care, having to just figure out life, becoming a parent, trying to graduate, from college. Could you just offer a sense of advice to either that foster youth or to those social workers or to those advocates or those foster parents out there in the world that, a sense of advice to, help better support, their, the student that's in their home. And so, yeah, I will start this question off, pass this on to Cynthia, and then Joanne, you can jump in, and then everybody's going to answer it. Well,
I have a question. What do I have to say?
Okay. I was like, is Cynthia still there? Yes. So
Yeah.
I'm asking you guys to just offer a piece of advice to either a foster parent, a social worker, a current or former foster youth out in the audience that may be experiencing, dealing with becoming a single parent and, trying to navigate life after the foster care system while still in the foster care system. Just give them a piece of advice so that, they can, have better knowledge on how they either support the foster youth or to support themselves.
I think maybe like focus on your goals and don't give up until you're able to succeed. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just take day by day and be able to basically take a few tasks instead of overwhelming yourself with multiple tasks. I feel like that's where society really has a hard time because we basically take a lot of how can I say things in our daily lives, multiple tasks where sometimes we do not have the time to get around our necessities and certain things that we have to do in our personal lives. So I feel like sometimes we have to take the time and focus on a few things at a time to be able to succeed in life instead of taking multiple tasks at a time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And I definitely agree. You guys focus on your goals and just give yourself time to develop and, enjoy the fruits of your labor or even trying to build and create that labor. And so, Joanne, I'll pass that same question over to you.
My only thing is college isn't the only option.
Yes. Say that. Say that. Yes, college is definitely not the only option. And as you can tell, you can choose to work and still go back to school. Entrepreneurship is also something that is being pushed and upcoming from this upcoming generation and our generation. And so that's definitely embracing, different pathways and different perspectives as you try to figure out your pathway and your road, taking the road less not traveled. That was something I wrote about and got me in college. So yeah, thank you so much, Joanne. Tamar, Jessica, Deshawn, any last thoughts of piece of advice to offer into onto current and former foster youth, any advocates out in the world to, that, have experienced the foster care system and, are trying to navigate through their parenthood?
I would say it's okay to feel all the feelings and don't let anyone stop you and tell you can't do anything. People tend to feel regretful, if they feel like, oh, did I make a bad choice, or this situation's hard, or do I regret, especially being young, naturally those are human emotions, and letting yourself feel them is what's going to make you grow and be a better person and parent. And anyone that tries to stop you, just step on them and do it anyways, because you're more powerful. I'd argue you can really do anything, especially taking that trauma and turning it into something beautiful. It can turn into a really, really great experience as a human.
Yes. Thank you so much, Tamara. That's beautiful. Very beautifully put. Jessica, D, any last thoughts? Any piece of advice that you would like to offer a current former foster youth and a special advocate, social worker out in the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I would say personally, you want to make sure that you recognize your traumas so that we don't repeat them with our offsprings, some personally, my mom felt physical hitting and things like that. And it's we know that that's not, it didn't help anything. It actually just hurt the situation. So you just recognize what didn't work so we don't repeat them. And anytime you get discouraged going forward, always think about the fact that, there was people out there that was single moms of 4 kids working 3 jobs and things like that made it work, that made it happen. I meet people in society when they tell me how they was raised with their parents, and I'm just like, wow, okay, they mama made it happen doing it like that, and I know I can make something happen. My situation ain't that drastic. I'm able to clear a lot of different hurdles, so it wouldn't be that difficult. So I know that the old saying goes is God don't put more on our plate than we can handle. That's very true. We don't have nothing that we can't propel past and learn from and grow from, and hear the children. I love when Tamara said oh, you're not hearing them right. He's communicating with you. Definitely hear the children. I can't even count how many times I didn't feel heard in my childhood, and that was another thing. Moving forward, I'm gonna make sure that I hear my children. I'm gonna make sure that I listen to my daughter, and so on and so forth.
Thank you, D. Jessica, any last thoughts?
Yes.
Any words of-
Yeah. Thank you. This has been such a great panel. Thank you, Raquel, for putting this together, and thank you everyone for sharing their stories. I just want to end off on saying, for the foster care youth, previous or currently in, just make sure that you understand that when you walk into a room, you are filled with expertise. You are not, don't ever shrink yourself or feel like you have to dim your light. Really own and in totality that you're charting your journey. It has been necessary, and it's going to make sense one day. And I hope that it convicts you to continue the journey of healing and to recovering, and to one day shine brightly and make an impact on the systems that have been broken. And to social workers, just know that the listening is in the power of what you can do. You are an agent of the state, and just kind of know that is a huge power dynamic. And just being able to understand that foster care youth have been disempowered by the system, and it could be an impactful change and significant impact if you give that power back to the youth and listen to what they say. They are the experts of their experience. So thanks.
Yes. Well, I would love to just again thank my lovely panelists today for being here and sharing their perspective. This conversation was definitely something that I feel like was needed and could have continued to keep happening. And so if you guys want to see a part 2, if you like what you heard today, please tell us how we did by filling out our post evaluation. It just helps me, learn different more topics that you guys want to talk about, whether or not this topic needs to be discussed further. And so please take the time to fill out the post evaluation, because it just helps me as the program manager to continue to try to uplift not only our panelists as they're sharing their empowering stories, but our audience members and the advocates who are, advocating for us. I also would like for you guys to know that we have included the list of resources, which you will also receive in your follow-up email, of different things that you guys could, find, resources that help single parents, and different things that you guys could be able to use, different services that you can be able to utilize as you're on your journey. And so we wanted to make sure that we provide that to you, and it will be in the email that you receive with your recording. Our next webinar, if you like what you saw today, if you attended any of our past previous webinars, our next upcoming webinar is going to be about maltreatment. It's called the Child Maltreatment Prevention, a safe place when there's no safe place. And we will be diving in to the topics of child abuse. If you are a social worker out there, whether you're in LA County or not, we are seeking 2 social workers who would like to come on and speak to and share their expertise on how they identify and recognize and create a safe space for foster youth to be able to disclose whether or not they're being abused or not, so that we can continue to fight and find ways to prevent child abuse, but also create an open space for youth to be able to speak openly about the things that they experienced while they were in the system that ultimately should have been protecting us. And so definitely please take the time to fill out the post evaluation. If you are interested in interested social worker, that if there's a space for you to leave your email address so that I can reach out to you in regards to our next upcoming webinar. Again, I want to thank our panelists. Thank you to Sarah, who is in the background, always holding us down with the technology support, flipping through the different slides, putting up the poll, posting things in the chat for us. Youth Voice program, obviously appreciate you, Sarah, and we could not do this without you. Again, thank you to my panelists, and thank you to all of the audience members who showed up. You guys will be receiving a recording of this. If you are interested in donating to support the Youth Voice program, the link is available as well, and will be provided in the follow-up email. And this helps support our program, help me to be able to continue to have conversations like this, where we create paid opportunities for former foster youth to be able to share their experiences and their stories. Again, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I look forward to seeing you guys at our next event. If you are a former or current foster youth out there and you're interested in learning more about the Youth Voice program, I dropped my email in the chat for you guys to reach out to me. I look forward to seeing you guys at our next event, and thank you so much. Everyone have a fabulous Thursday, and you will be receiving our follow-up email as soon as the recording is made available for us. Thank you again to my panelists too as well. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm definitely open. I've seen some rooting for part 2 conversations in the chat. And so if you guys are open, I definitely would love to have you guys come on again, whether for a part 2 conversation about, parenting, etc., and what affects foster youth, or that be another conversation about any of the experiences that we have. You guys go to therapy, everybody focus on trauma and healing, but just thank you all again for being here today. And I appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time.